Hello, my name is JJ Sanchez, and I am a member of the grant negotiation team. Today I will be taking you through actions that you could take prior to completing the application, as well as required schedules that will need to be completed before you are able to access the 2025-2026 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Once I have completed my portion of the training, my colleagues Lori Marcourt, Tammy Michaels, and Kelly Wima will take you through the process of completing the 2025-2026 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. This presentation is being presented as a recording. Before we get started, please note that the information being presented is general information based on the agency's current understanding of the subject matter. It is subject to change. It does not constitute legal advice, and you are advised to seek your own legal counsel before acting on any information or guidance being presented. The Texas Education Agency, TEA, does not permit third-party recording or the use of artificial intelligence, AI, summary services during its grants-related trainings. The agenda for today's training will touch on the following topics: preparations you should take before starting on your application, completing the SC 5003 Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule, completing the GS 2200 Applicant Designation and Certification, ADC. Then we will go over completing the application schedules as well as review updates to the 2025-2026 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal, the budget schedules, and finally, important resources related to Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Next, we'll be looking at some steps you usually want to take prior to application opening or as early as possible. Here are some preparations to take before starting the application. Update information in ASTED. School systems and campus information in ASTED should ideally be updated by early April 2025. Verify staff has TEAL and eGrants access. It is best to get access as early as possible, between April to May. So if you haven't done so, we suggest you doing it now. Coordinate with other staff members, set up time and communicate with those who have information that will help you complete the application. Obtain a copy of the most recently approved 2024-2025 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Review the application and any negotiation items. Once the application has been reviewed, use it to help complete the 2025-2026 grant application. Coordinate and update eGrants contacts for special education, ESSA, and Perkins. As a reminder, be sure to use Chrome as your internet browser. TEA's homepage can be very helpful. You can access TEA's homepage at tea.texas.gov. Several items that will be discussed in today's presentation are located at the top of the page in the popular applications ribbon, such as ASTED, grant opportunities, and TEAL login. Also, please be sure to take note of the Finance and Grants tabs in the middle of the page. Hover over that tab and you'll be able to locate more information about grants and grants administration. Let's start by looking at ASTED. Once you have selected the ASTED link, it will take you to the ASTED webpage or Texas Education Directory. Once you are on this page, you can search for and review your district and campus information. Make sure to check and update campus information if needed. Check and update campus grade span. Also, check and update school systems information. If updates need to be made, contact your ASTED administrator. Next, be sure all staff that need access to TEAL and eGrants have access or get access as early as possible. Make sure new and existing staff have the correct roles for completing the application. By selecting the TEAL login link on the popular applications ribbon of TEA's homepage, you will be taken to the TEA login screen. On the TEA login TEAL screen, if you don't have a TEAL account, click on the Request New User Account link above the username. You'll be redirected to a screen to provide information and submit your request. If you already have an account, this is the screen where you will log into TEAL and access eGrants. If you have a new superintendent or designee who will be the grantee official certified submitting the application, work with them to get their access to TEAL as early as possible. Program staff and or grant writers should know who the grantee official is, so once they have completed the information in the application, they can notify and follow up appropriately with the grantee official to be sure that the application has been submitted to TEA in a timely manner. Clean up and delete old access. Maybe someone has been promoted and or just has multiple roles for some reason. Review staff's roles periodically and delete roles that are no longer applicable to a person's position and duties. If you are requesting access through TEAL, there are several applications you can request.
you will need to request eGrants access.
Now let's talk about eGrants roles and privileges. This table shows you specifically the eGrants roles in blue on the left that have different capabilities based on the different areas, tabs of eGrants in black along the top. For example, in the Contacts tab of eGrants, all roles except Grantee Viewer can modify information. Another example, if you are in the Special Collections tab working on the SC 5003, only a grantee official or grantee manager can submit changes. Please note, once you are working on the grant application, the eGrants tab, only the grantee official can submit the original application. If you need assistance in identifying the proper role, contact the TEA grant negotiator assigned to your region. We'll provide more information on how to contact your negotiator when we get to the Grant Resources section. When requesting access to eGrants, the correct CDN and vendor ID number will be needed. The vendor ID number must be a 10-digit number. For school systems, it will usually begin with a 1 followed by the school system's federal employment ID number. For a few charter schools operated by a university, the ID number will usually begin with a 3 followed by the school system's federal employment ID number. The same 10-digit vendor ID number is also used to access ER for payment requests. Start early and coordinate with others who will aid in completing the Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Collaborate with ESSA and Perkins staff members who also have a stake in completing the contacts information and SC 5003. More on this in a moment. Work with business office staff to be sure items budgeted in the application are properly coded. For example, knowing your school system's capitalization level is key for properly budgeting supplies and capital outlay. Knowing your school system's capitalization level may help to avoid amendments later in the year. Work with those involved with the needs assessment and properly document activities in the grant application. Fiscal agents need to begin communicating and setting up agreements with member districts. If you need a list of your SSA members, access your current Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. On the BS 6001 Program Budget Summary, there is a button that will produce a report of your current SSA members. Finally, consider processes specific to your school system. If there's anyone else you need to coordinate with, start early and set up time with them also. Obtain a copy of the most recently approved copy of the 24-25 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Review the negotiation notes in the GS 2300 Negotiation Comments and Confirmation Schedule, and based upon those notes, improve the information included in this year's 2025-2026 Special Education Grant Application Federal. This should reduce negotiation time and help everyone receive their awards more quickly. To obtain a copy of the most recently approved copy of the 24-25 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal, go to the Document Library tab and select the 2024-2025 school year. Under Grant Programs, select the 2024-2025 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Then select Grant Application and click on the blue Search Radio button. Updating your eGrants contacts. You do not need to wait until the grant application is launched by TEA to update the contacts information in eGrants. This tab is available to update at any time. Remember, this is not just for the Special Education Grant application. Information in the Contacts tab includes ESSA and Perkins contacts. Be sure to include the grantee official who will be certifying and submitting the SC 5003, ADC, and grant application. Also, the primary and secondary contacts for your Special Education Grant Application Federal, as well as others who may submit negotiation responses for the original grant and/or amendments. There is a training video available online if you need assistance updating your eGrants contacts.
If you need to add, edit, or remove a contact, you can do so by clicking the Contacts tab at the top left of the page. Once clicked, you will see the Add, Edit, and Remove buttons at the bottom of the screen. Once you have clicked the Add button, you'll be prompted to enter the new contact's information. There's also a video with step-by-step instructions on how to add, edit, and remove contacts on the TEA website under the Grants Administration. The SC 5003 is a consolidated schedule that contains the guidelines and assurances for SPED Federal, SPED State, ESSA, and Perkins. We will talk about completing the SC 5003 over the next couple of slides. In order to access the SC 5003, you will need to log into TEAL.
Once you are logged into TEAL, you will find a list of applications, such as eGrants, Special Education Reports, expenditures reporting, and GFFC reports. In the eGrants application section, select the eGrants role that will permit you to work on the Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. For example, school system staff may have Grantee Viewer role and Grantee Manager role. The Viewer role will only allow you to look at the contacts list, but the Grantee Manager role will permit you to edit the contact information.
Once in eGrants, enter your county district number in the box located on the top right corner of the screen. The SC and SC 5003 stands for Special Collection. Therefore, you will find the SC 5003 under the Special Collections tab. Select the SC 5003 Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule link from the list and start reviewing the information and make updates as appropriate. When completing the SC 5003, all three grant programs, SPED, ESSA, and Perkins, will need to include any barriers to equitable access and participation for groups receiving services. Be sure to allow the ESSA and Perkins grant program staff to complete this section before it is certified and submitted. It is acceptable to select no barriers.
All three grant programs, Special Education, ESSA, and Perkins, will need to review the general guidelines, provision assurances, debarment and suspension, lobbying certification, and program-specific guidelines and provisions and assurances.
Once all the program staff for SPED, ESSA, and Perkins have completed and reviewed parts 1 and 2, the authorized official will need to certify and submit the SC 5003. Complete the information in the authorized official section by selecting the appropriate person under Select Contact. The submitted information will be completed by the system once the Certify and Submit button is selected.
The next form you will need to complete is the Applicant Designation and Certification, or ADC. You will log in through TIL and select the eGrants role that permits you to complete the ADC. Once in eGrants, enter your CDN as described previously for the SC 5003. This time you will select the Grants tab to find the 2526 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Click on the Special Education Grant and there will be a list where you can select the Special Education Applicant Designation and Certification form. Part 1 Designation, select the radio button for how you will apply for each funding source. You can either apply on own as an independent, apply as a fiscal agent of a shared services arrangement, not apply at all, or apply as a member of a shared services arrangement. A shared services arrangement is a group of eligible school systems working together on a grant. If you are in an SSA, you must allow your fiscal agent to select a designation first. We will talk more about this later. It is also very important to identify if you will not be applying for a source of funds. If you are not eligible or do not have any funds for a specific program or funding source, that line will be disabled and grayed out. In Part 2, the authorized official should review the certification and corporation statement. Select the authorized official's name from the drop-down menu under Select Contact, or add a new contact if needed, and then select the Certify and Submit button to submit the application to TEA. The submitter information will automatically populate once the Certify and Submit button has been selected. If you are in an SSA, certifying and submitting the ADC means that you have a written agreement in place. The certification language also states that SSAs must remain in effect for the duration of the project period. Certifying and submitting the ADC means you agree with these statements. Now I want to go back and talk a little bit more about SSAs and the application. Again, an SSA is a financial arrangement between a group of eligible school systems to work together on a grant. The SSA members designate the fiscal agent to be ultimately responsible for conducting administrative duties, including submitting the grant application for its members. The ADC is important for all applicants, especially SSAs. It determines whether you have an independent application. If you apply as a member of an SSA for all fund sources, you will not have an independent application. If you are in an SSA, the ADC determines where your funds go. Your allocation will go to the fiscal agent you select from the drop-down menu. If you select the wrong fiscal agent, your funds are tied to the entity you selected. The fiscal agent of the SSA must complete the ADC form first and select Apply as Fiscal Agent of SSA. Then, the members of the SSA will need to complete their ADC. They will select Apply as Member of SSA and designate the fiscal agent by selecting their name and county district numbers, CDN, from the drop-down menu. If a member district does not see their fiscal agent in the drop-down menu, they will need to contact the fiscal agent. Just one final note as we discuss SSAs and the application. We talked a little bit about the requirement to have an SSA agreement. The SSA agreement should describe all processes and procedures to be followed by the SSA, including what happens to any remaining funds when a member leaves the SSA. If an SSA discovers that they need to make funds available to a member who left the SSA, contact TEA Grants Administration Division for further instructions. This completes my portion of the presentation. I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Lori Marquardt, who will walk you through the general application schedules and the program schedule.
My name is Lori Marquardt, and I'm in the Grants Administration Division. Now I will walk you through completing the application schedules. Once you have completed the ADC and certified it, the application will be available to complete. Click on the Special Ed Consolidated Grant Application Federal, and you will see the table of contents. Once you are on the table of contents page, you will be able to see all of the schedules that need to be completed. You will want to fill out the GS 2100 Applicant Information Schedule first. Now let's talk about the GS 2100 Applicant Information Schedule. Part 1 includes the organization information and the Unique Entity Identifier number, also called the UEI number. If you need to apply for a UEI number, please go to sam.gov and follow the instructions. Part 2 of the GS 2100 schedule displays the applicant information, including primary and secondary contacts for the grant. Because these individuals will be the first point of contact if negotiation is required, please make sure their contact is correct and up to date. Remember, you can add, edit, or delete contacts by going to the Contacts tab in eGrants. This schedule can be updated at any time without completing an amendment. Now let's discuss the GS 2300 Negotiation Comments and Confirmation Schedule. This schedule is used by TEA to communicate with applicants. When revisions to the application are required, the TEA staff member may enter information under Part 1 General Comments and will provide specific notes under Part 2 Negotiation Items about the changes needed. Review each negotiation note and revise the schedule as indicated. Respond with your own comments in the Grantee Comments section if necessary. Click LEA Completed Change when you have edited the schedule. Then click Save to complete the schedule. Next, we will talk about the GS 2900 Purpose of Amendment Schedule. Part 1 Amendment Justification. A. Required Post-Award Compliance Amendment. Only click on the Yes radio button if the amendment is being submitted because it was requested by TEA's Post-Award Compliance Review Unit. Otherwise, always click on the No radio button. B. Amendment Justification. Provide a brief description of each change and a reason for each change. Note, do not include brand names, specific vendor names, dollar amounts, or calculations as part of your descriptions. Part 2, Confirmation of Understanding of Stated Terms. Confirm your understanding of the stated terms by checking the Yes box at the bottom of the schedule. Click Save. Once saved, be sure to update the application schedules. The Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal has one program schedule, the PS 3502 Private Nonprofit Schools Participation Schedule. Part 1 of the schedule lists exceptions for the PS 3502 schedule. If the grantee is an open enrollment charter school, or if there are no private schools, including home schools, located within the legal boundaries, the grantee will check one of the two options. The rest of the schedule will close and you can move on to the next schedule. Otherwise, the grantee must complete the remainder of the schedule. Let's go to Part 4 and talk about proportionate share calculations. Please note that line 2 should be greater than line 3. Line 2 equals students ages 3 through 21 in public schools on the last Friday in October 2024. Line 3 equals students ages 3 through 21 in private schools on the last Friday in October 2024. Just a reminder that this information is taken on a certain date, so this schedule does not need to be amended to update these numbers. Part A was for Idea B formula, and Part B is for Idea B preschool. Again, line 2 should be more than or the same as line 3. The system will provide an error message if line 3 is greater than line 2 for Part A and Part B. Line 2 is students ages 3 through 5 in public schools on the last Friday in October 2024. Line 3 is students ages 3 through 5 in private schools on the last Friday in October 2024. Now we will look at Part 6 services. In this section, the grantee must describe how they determine which private school students to serve. The grantee must provide a few sentences describing their consultation process. For example, the grantee can state that they met with private schools and determined that speech services were the greatest need, and because of their consultation process, they will serve private school students that need speech services. Part 7 is in regards to consultation process documentation. The grantee is able to select more than one selection under Part 7 if they apply. Documentation of the attempts made to obtain written affirmation must be attached if the second checkbox is selected. This documentation should include a description of the attempts the LEA made to acquire written affirmation from private schools, that timely and meaningful consultation occurred if the private school did not sign that they received consultation. We have a private school consultations template. If you do not have a copy of this template, please contact your regional negotiator to request a copy. This slide is in regards to how to assist you in attaching documentation in eGrants. For example, if you need to attach the private school consultation form because you selected the second box under Part 7 on the PS 3502. Step 1. Click on Attach Files button that is located next to the View Errors icon on the Table of Contents page. This will open the attached file page. Then the instructions will guide you on how to attach your document. Make sure the file is saved to your computer before attempting to upload the document. I will now hand it over to my colleague Tammy Michaels to go over the budget schedules.
Now that we have gone over the special education federal grant application program schedules, let's look at the budget schedules. The BS 6001 schedule is the program budget summary. There are 3 fund sources in the special education federal grant: Idea B formula, Idea B preschool, and Idea B discretionary deaf. Depending on how the ADC or application designation form was completed and what fund sources the organization is eligible for, will determine the available funding listed in Part 1, Available Funding. Part 2 is the detailed breakdown of how those funds will be used in the grant. Just like in previous years, CEIS funds are no longer documented in the budget summary. CEIS is only documented in the BS 6016. I will be covering this in more detail when we review the BS 6016 schedule. Please note that as you enter information in Part 2 of the budget summary, funds will auto-populate in the appropriate supporting budget schedule. As a reminder, direct administrative costs are not allowable with Idea B funds. This is why Part C, breakout of direct admin costs, is hidden in the budget summary. Also note that although funds may not be budgeted for each fund source, in order to complete the application, each schedule must be opened and saved. Let's move on to the supporting budget schedules. Now we will go over the BS 6101 payroll cost schedule. The BS 6101 supporting budget schedule is for payroll cost. Part 1 of the schedule is pre-populated from the selections in the BS 6001 Program Budget Summary for each funding source. Again, if funds are not allocated for payroll costs in the budget summary, then just save the schedule. Part A. Remember, administrative cost is not allowable with IDEA B funds. That is why Part 2A, Line 1, is grayed out. Part B and C require checks instead of documenting the number of positions. To complete the schedule, use the checkboxes to indicate school systems positions and campus positions for being paid with grant funds. Be sure to select the checkboxes under the appropriate fund source for the types of positions that you are budgeting in Part 2. Now let's review the Part 3 section in the payroll schedule. Part 3 of the BS 6101 covers substitutes, extra duty pay, and benefits. Line 1 is for school-wide personnel. To give you some background on this, statute states that school-wide programs may consolidate with other federal, state, and local funds. This is why the school-wide checkbox is an option in the schedule. By selecting the school-wide checkbox in Part 3, the grantee is indicating that they are consolidating either federal or federal, state, and local funds in the ESSA SC 5000 schedule. Additionally, the grantee is indicating that the budgeted funds will be used to pay for personnel who provide services on school-wide campuses not coded 8911. In the next slide, I will go over the SC 5000 schedule as it relates to the school-wide checkbox. If the school-wide checkbox is selected in Part 3, then the SC 5000 must indicate one or more campuses designated as school-wide and selecting consolidation of funds. Consolidation of funds is indicated in the ESSA SC 5000 by selecting either federal funds only or federal, state, and local funds. This image is an example of what the SC 5000 should look like if the grantee decided to select the school-wide checkbox on the SPED Consolidated Grant Part 3 payroll cost schedule. As a final reminder about Part 3, please note that this section is for positions not selected in Part 2. As a reminder, you may always click on the instruction button within each schedule to get additional information and guidance on completing the required information. This is a great resource available to assist you with completing the e-grant schedules, especially if you are new. The instruction button is located on the upper right-hand corner of every budget schedule. The next schedule we will review is the BS 6201 Professional and Contracted Services Schedule. You'll notice that there are 3 parts in the BS 6201 schedule. Let's first review Part 1 of the schedule. If funds for professional and contracted services were budgeted in the program budget summary, those funds are pre-populated in Part 1, line remaining 6,200 costs that do not require specific approval. If the district needs to budget for specific costs, there are 2 ways to do so in this schedule. The first way is in Part 1, Line 1. There is a space to enter costs for rental or lease of buildings, space in buildings, or land. If the district budgets funds in Line 1, the remaining 6,200 line will automatically be reduced. The second way to budget for specific costs is in Line 2, Professional and Contracted Services. Again, if funds are budgeted in Line 2, the remaining 6,200 line will be reduced. If funds are budgeted in Line 2, Professional and Contracted Services, then there must be itemized funds in Part 3 of the schedule. Now let's discuss Part 2, Direct Administrative Costs. Again, as direct administrative costs are not allowed to be charged to the grant, this section is closed. Part 3 of the Professional Contracted Services allows you to itemize specific services. Notice that some of the specific costs have grayed out boxes. This indicates that the cost is unallowable for this grant program. You may also review our detailed program guidelines that identify allowable professional and contracted services for guidance on allowable activities. You may find the program guidelines through the link provided under Resources or through TEA's website under Grant Opportunities. If the district has allowable itemized cost, please enter the funds for the service under the appropriate fund source. Note that we have added the following service under Part 3, Itemized Professional and Contracted Services: Data Records Management System. If a particular professional, consulting, and/or contracted service is not listed in lines 1 through 29, type the title of the service in this section. Specify the purpose for this requested service and enter the amounts requested for the fund sources. Make sure the description is generic and the purpose is related to special education. Now let's review the BS 6401 Other Operating Cost Schedule. As a reminder, there is not a schedule for 6300 supplies and materials as they do not require specific approval. You may only budget supplies and materials in the BS 6001 Program Budget Summary. As with other e-grant schedules, unallowable activities are shaded in gray. If funds were budgeted in the Program Budget Summary, they will appear in Part 1, remaining 6400 costs that do not require specific approval. If costs need to be itemized in lines 1 through 7, the funds will automatically be deducted from the amount in remaining 6400 costs. Documentation for lines 2, 4, and 6 pertain to participant support costs. The organization will retain this documentation internally and no longer submit these forms unless specifically requested for audit or monitoring purposes. There are justification forms available for out-of-state travel, educational field trips, and travel costs for officials in the forms for prior approval, disclosure, and justification link. Remember, you don't have to submit these forms as you did to us in the past. Just complete the forms and store them appropriately. Forms maintained locally must be provided to auditors and monitors upon request. Now let's move on to discuss the remaining costs that do not require specific approval. The final section of the BS 6401 is remaining 6400 costs that do not require specific approval. To identify if a cost does not require specific approval, please review pages 13 and 14 of the Budgeting Cost Guidance Handbook. Items frequently budgeted and remaining costs are in-state travel for employees, publication and printing costs, plus many more. Because there is a line for out-of-state travel, people who are new at completing these forms expect to find a line for in-state travel. However, there isn't one. That is because in-state travel does not require specific approval. These costs will be budgeted in remaining 6400. The next schedule we'll discuss is the BS 6501 Debt Services Schedule. The Debt Services Schedule includes both subscription-based information technology arrangements, or SPIDAs, and capital lease liability cost. First, let's discuss SPIDAs. In Part 1, Line 1, you will enter the principal cost incurred during the beginning and ending dates of the grant period for SPIDAs. Part 2 is where you will enter the description, fund source, start and end dates, and subscription costs for the SPIDA. Just to clarify, Part 1, you enter the amount for the SPIDA that was incurred during the grant application dates only, whereas in Part 2, you enter the amount for the full subscription cost. A few examples of SPIDAs are service contracts, cloud computing, and routine maintenance. These subscriptions are for more than 12 months, but less than 5 years. The following fields are unallowable with IDEAB funds for all 3 fund sources. You will also find that they are grayed out in regards to SPIDAs and capital lease liability. Line 2, SPEDA liability interest. Line 4, capital lease liability interest. And line 5, interest on debt are all unallowable. Now let's discuss capital lease liabilities. Part 1, line 3 is where you will enter capital lease liability principal. And in Part 3, you will enter the description, fund source, contract dates, and property value. A couple of reminders. Contract dates must include the current school year, and these costs are usually a 2 to 3 year agreement. The cost must be approved by TEA and be allowable. Now let's discuss the BS 6601 capital outlay schedule. If funds were budgeted for capital outlay in the BS 6001 program budget summary, they will be pre-populated in line 3 and the total capital outlay cost line. Per EGR guidelines, items must be capitalized if they cost $10,000 or more per item, and if they meet the district's capitalization level, whichever amount is less. Equipment is capitalized if it is a non-expendable, tangible personal property with a useful life of 1 year or more and meets or exceeds the capitalization level. There are 3 ways to itemize costs within the capital outlay schedule. Again, if funds were budgeted for capital outlay in the program budget summary, funds will pre-populate in Part 1, line 3 for furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software costs in the total capital outlay cost line. If the district budgets items in lines 1 and 2, line 3 will automatically be reduced. Line 1 is for budgeting special education related library books or media controlled by the library. Line 2 is for costs to upgrade or improve equipment purchased through the previous year's special education funding. Line 3 functions a little differently, as the district must itemize these costs in Part 2 of the schedule, and the cost of these items must equal the amount budgeted in line 3. If funds are budgeted in Part 1, line 3, these costs must be itemized in Part 2. Examples include special education related furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software costs. In this section, please enter the description, number of units, the fund source, and a brief generic description related to the special education program. For example, type adapted bus to transport special education students instead of just bus. The district may add or remove items using the blue buttons at the bottom of the schedule. The last schedule, the Special Education Federal Consolidated Grant, is the BS 6016 Fiscal Compliance Requirements Schedule. Next, we are going to discuss the BS 6016 Fiscal Compliance Requirements Schedule. Let's start with line 1. In line 1, you will enter the amount of state and local or local-only special education expenditures from the most recent prior year that the school system was in MOE compliance. This information may be found on the most recent IDEA B MOE Compliance Review Report. Now let's move to line 2. In line 2, enter the state and local or local-only special education funds budgeted for the current year. Remember, if the district enters state and local expenditures in line 1, then the district must enter state and local expenditures in line 2. Lines 1 and 2 do not pertain to the district's federal funds, only state and local or local funds expended. Line 1 is for the most recent prior year's SPED expenditures, and line 2 is for the current year's state and local or local only special education budget. Now that we have reviewed what information is required, let's look at the results of completing these two amounts. So if line 2 is less than line 1, the justification will automatically open line 3. Otherwise, line 3 will not open and you will not need to complete it. If line 2 is greater than or equal to line 1, the district will move down to line 4. In line 4, the district will select one of the options. Either the district has used state and local or local only expenditures to complete lines 1 and 2. Line 1B has been added to the BS 6016 schedule this year. The school systems must confirm by checking the box that the data provided in line 1A is data from page 2 of the 23-24 Idea B, School Systems MOE Final Compliance Review. Line 3, the amount entered in line 2 plus the amount entered in the MOE reduction in line 3 must equal or exceed line 1. If the school system's budget does not equal or exceed the amount expended in the most recent year, the district must select a specific justification from the options. Then on the right-hand side of line 3, document the amount of MOE reduction. Part B, MOE voluntary reduction. Here the district must select one option. If you are a fiscal agent of an SSA, you must complete the section for each member district. To determine which option to select, compare the district's current year planning amount and final amount to the prior year's final amount to determine if the district is eligible for MOE voluntary reduction. The district must meet all three requirements in order to voluntarily reduce MOE. The three qualifications are: 1. Must have an increase in Idea B formula final amount from the previous year. 2. Must have a determination that meets requirements. And 3. Has not been identified as having significant disproportionality. The third option on the schedule provides the district with the opportunity to voluntarily reduce MOE for 25-26. If this option is selected, the district must then complete the MOE voluntary reduction amount for the actual amount of MOE being decreased in the current year. If the district does not have an actual amount when submitting the schedule, they can report an estimate, and then when final amounts are available, an amendment can be submitted to revise it to the actual amount. Another option, if the district is undecided on whether or not to voluntarily reduce MOE, is to wait until final amounts are available and select option 1 or 2 until then. Then, if you decide to voluntarily reduce MOE, they can amend the application and add the amount. Now we will move on to Part 2 of the BS 6016 Fiscal Compliance Requirements Schedule. Part 2 CEIS and CCIS Requirements. The district will only complete this section if funds are being reserved for CEIS or CCEIS. Otherwise, leave sections in Parts 2A and B blank. School systems that are identified with significant disproportionality are required to reserve the full 15% of Idea B formula and/or Idea B preschool funds in the schedule. If you are required to or decide to reserve funds for struggling non-disabled students in Part A, first select the district name from the drop-down list. In the second column, make sure you select CCEIS if you are required to reserve the full 15%. The third column in Part A will reflect the maximum allowable reservation. If you are reserving CEIS or CCIS funds, enter the amount the district will reserve up to 15% in either Idea B formula and/or Idea B preschool. If you are a fiscal agent of an SSA, you may add additional districts by clicking on the Add Member District. Remember, CEIS is no longer allocated in other budget schedules. It is only allocated in the BS 6016 Part 2. If the district decides to remove CEIS funds, then the district will need to delete the member districts information in sections Part 2A and B.
My name is Kelly Wamhoff, and I'm a grant negotiator here at the Texas Education Agency. Now we will go over some resources that may assist you when completing the 2025-2026 Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. We will be hosting a series of video conferencing office hours to support school systems with completing the Special Education Federal and Perkins applications. These meetings are primarily for grantees to ask questions about completing the application. If you have questions about completing the application after you have viewed the recorded training videos, please join one of the office hour sessions. The schedule for office hour support is on the screen. There will be 3 sessions for each grant, one in June, one in July, and one in August. Special Educated Consolidated Federal, Perkins, and ESSA Consolidated recording training videos are available on the Grants Administration Grant Resources page. On the Grants Resources page, you'll find a large range of resources, including detailed training videos and presentations. Again, you'll want to go ahead and make sure everyone who needs it has access to TEAL and access to eGrants. Update contacts in eGrants and make sure everyone has the proper role assigned in eGrants. This can be done now, and we encourage you to go ahead and do it before the applications are launched. Note, the grantee official is the only one authorized to delete drafts and submit original applications. We also have a variety of how-to videos that can assist you in setting up access and editing contacts. We will place the virtual trainings for the 25-26 federal eGrant applications on the website and include slides and videos so that you can watch and digest the information at your own pace. This is the 2025-2026 Federal Grants Important Dates document. It outlines key dates for several of the major grant programs. The Special Education Federal Grant is open, which means you are now able to complete the application. The application due date is September 3rd. However, we encourage you to submit your applications early. From the schedule, you can also view important dates for the ESSA, Perkins, and rural and low-income grants. This document is available on the Grants Administration Grant Resources page. Here are the current division contacts by region. If your district has questions regarding one of the Big Three applications or other applications, they can contact their regional negotiator. We also have a general contact information for our division. Please note that the negotiators and their assigned regions are subject to change. When necessary, a negotiator may direct you to the appropriate contact. This list also includes expenditure reporting contacts in case you have a question in regards to the ER system. This slide provides the links to helpful guidance for the Special Education Consolidated Grant Application Federal. Our TEA Grant Opportunities page link lists applications available. You can search for your grants, look up due dates, entitlements, program guidelines, and other important information to manage grants. The Applying for a Grant link provides umbrella guidance on how to apply for grants and what to expect during the grant cycle. The eGrants link provides access to all electronic grants such as Special Education, ESSA, and Perkins. The eGrants link works best with Google Chrome. The Grant Resources link contains popular resources, fiscal support, trainings, and video resources. The Special Education Entitlement link has entitlement information for the Big Three grants and school safety. The IDEA Fiscal Compliance link gives information about compliance and reporting, IDEA school systems and MOE, and excess costs. The Administering a Grant link is where you can locate justification forms to keep locally.
Thank you for your continued dedication and support of our students across Texas. We are excited about the opportunities this year holds and look forward to a successful year with you.